Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. This podcast explores the transition to net zero and the systems driving real change in how we move, live and power our world. Every week I sit down with the people leading that change, those offering insight, innovation and impact in many ways people don't fully see until they hear their stories. If you're ready for real conversations that inspire action and drive change, please like this video, subscribe to the channel and join us on this journey, and let's cut through the noise and build a better future together. I have got the most wonderful guest with me, a lovely lady called Jolene Cook. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background first before I even let you speak, Jolene, because we've known each other, oh my God. Well, we haven't spoken to each other for over 10 years, have we? But we've known each other for, oh God, I can't even remember what year it is now. It's probably about 2008.
Maybe about that. Maybe even just a little bit. Yeah, a little bit before that.
Yeah. And I will explain what Jolene does, and then I'll go into a little bit of detail. I think between the two of us, we'll go into a little bit of detail about what we did. So Jolene is the head of international climate science, UK IPCC focal point at the Department for Energy, Security and Net Zero. Oh my God, what a title. Thank you for joining me. You are just, I've been so excited knowing that I was going to be talking to you.
Oh, that's really nice. Thank you. Oh, it's an honor. I mean, look at this. This is amazing. What an important podcast. I had to be part of it, surely. Yeah.
Oh, it was just mental that I've not had you on before, honestly. But right, I'm going to just say a little bit about what you've done, and then I'll say how we know each other. So Jolene did a PhD in atmospheric sciences and meteorology at the University of Reading. So she knows my husband, Richard Allan. She started working in London for the Department of Energy and Climate Change in 2009. This woman's career has just bloomed, and I just want to say she's an amazing, gorgeous, wonderful, lovely person. And we sang together in a band at my 40th birthday, which is a long time ago, and it just makes me very sad.
A couple of years ago, Liz.
So she's channeling her inner singer today, aren't you, darling?
I'm trying my hardest. Yeah. Just projecting, being confident. Yeah. Being interesting and fun. Yeah.
You are. Oh my God, you are interesting. I mean, good God, look what you do. Look what you're doing. Flipping it. She's gone from playing in bands and working at Reading University to being a science advisor in London. I need to find out. We've got to talk about this because it's funny, isn't it? When you're kind of musical, because we're both musical, and she plays keyboard, just an amazing keyboard player. I don't know whether you do it much more anymore.
I do still play the piano, or at least I have one in the house. Yeah, I don't get enough time to play it, but yeah, I am still playing.
And you've got a 3-year-old. I don't know how you do it with a 3-year-old as well. Oh my God! But look, let's just go through this. Just give me a little bit of background. So you were doing your PhD at Reading University, but what kind of got you interested in meteorology for a start off? What was it? Was it maps like my husband, or was it something else?
You know what? There was absolutely zero grand plan. I'm very much a kind of, just poodle along through life, see what happens. And actually my original, when I left my undergrad, so, I mean, even my undergrad was a sign of my indecision. My undergrad was in maths and music because I couldn't choose between the two. Right. And then I left. Was temping, traveling after a bit, and then I fell into actually fund management. I ended up working for a fund management company and started doing exam for fund management. But while I was doing that, I saw an advert come up for BBC weather presenters, right?
Yeah.
And so I actually I applied for the job, and I think the one I applied for, there were 500 applicants, and I managed to get down to the last 11. But you have to go through a screen test and everything. And at that point, they said to me, "Oh, you weren't successful because you don't have any meteorology experience." Like, oh, okay, right. So while working in fund management, I decided to leave fund management to go and do a master's up in Edinburgh to get a bit more of the modelling side of things, the mathematical modelling that you need for meteorology, and get around that, and then come back. And then after that, I got a job in Reading University before, sort of just a postgraduate role, and thought, oh, this climate change thing is quite interesting, isn't it? And then did a PhD, and then carried on doing a postdoc, and then just got really into it. I was always quite interested in the environment and worried. But going into climate change wasn't a plan. It's just something you realise, actually, this is really important. Did my postdocs at Reading, obviously working with Rich, and that's when I had all my the band, and we were singing playing, performing quite a lot. But it got to the point where I thought, okay, I've got to make a choice. Do I stay in academia, follow the routes that, Rich has done, and so many others of, people from Reading do, who are so passionate about what they do, or do I do something different? And I chose to do something different because I wanted to be a bit closer to where you can have an impact on the actual action around climate change. Rather than just researching it. I wanted that science to make a difference. And I saw this job come up in what at the time was the Department of Energy and Climate Change for a science advisor. And that was in 2009. That was a long time ago. And was successful and started working in that. And what an amazing job. I started off at the junior levels, but it was all about keeping abreast of what the science was saying, making sure you were sort of understanding what the science is saying, what the implications of that science were, and passing it on to policymakers in the department and to ministers, and really advising them, look, this is what the science is saying is happening around climate change. This is what the science is saying needs to happen if you want to tackle it. And then I was also at the same time managing research programs and things. Anyway, so I did that, but one part of my role at that time was starting to get more into the international climate action scene, and really understanding what you mentioned the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, understanding what that was, which was a real eye-opener. When you work in climate science, as Rich knows, and as a postdoc or a junior researcher, you know of the IPCC, and it's almost like its reports are kind of like your Bible, if you like. If you want to know about a new topic, you go straight to an IPCC report, and it will give you this amazing summary of the latest information on a particular topic. But at that point, I think very few people know actually what goes into producing those reports, and that you're actually involved as an author like Rich. And you don't understand the power of those reports. It's that it's an intergovernmental process. It's not just a pure science thing. It's about all these countries coming together and helping develop these reports, and that's hugely important. So I got into it like that. Did a few more years. Took a couple of years out to go to the European Commission, where I did more on the IPCC, but also then got more involved in the political side, so the international climate negotiations as well. So that's the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. And so my role was about making sure the science is feeding into that, making sure that IPCC's work is feeding into that. And then I came back to the department, and it went through various changes. First it became the Department for Business, was it Energy and Industrial Strategy, and now recently it's become Energy Security and Net Zero. And then I got my current role, which is, as you say, Head of International Climate Science. I've been doing this for about 7-8 years now, where I'm, as you say, the focal point, so the UK's representative in the IPCC. And also I'm the lead negotiator in the UK team for science issues within the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change as well. But essentially all of it is about making sure the huge body of science on climate change is feeding into these processes, that policymakers, both international and national, have the evidence they need to make decisions. So hugely interesting, and for me it feels really worthwhile and impactful, and you can see the impact of IPCC reports, etc., on the international process and the national process, and happy to talk a little bit more about that and what focal point actually does. So, Yeah.
I'd love to know. I'd love to know. Actually, do you know what I think? So you've given a little bit of information about the IPCC, but the process takes quite a long time, doesn't it? And like
It does.
the section that Rich was working on was a new one on the section he was on. How, because we're talking about hundreds of scientists, aren't we, coming together from all over the world to actually work on this for a period of time. Is it 3 years that they all
It
work together?
varies. It can be, yeah, up to 3 years together, depending on the report. But yeah, huge endeavor, huge global effort, and massively influential worldwide. Maybe I just say maybe you should say what the IPCC is specifically.
Yeah,
So, as I said,
yeah.
it's an intergovernmental panel. So the IPCC itself comprises 195 governments, 195 countries around the world. And the panel itself is actually, focal points, representatives, countries in these meetings. So it's a UN body, it's a United Nations body, and its role is essentially to assess the body of literature on the science and technical information on climate change and climate change solutions, and to produce these reports, which then are used to inform policymakers. Okay. So, the process is huge. It is the authoritative body on climate science. So what you see in those reports represents the scientific consensus. And the process to develop its reports really ensures that those reports are robust, accurate, gives you a good indication on level of confidence in those reports, and where there might still be some scientific uncertainties, for example. So what happens? So if the IPCC goes through cycles of assessments. Each cycle is roughly, I don't know, 6 to 7 years long. And during each cycle, at the very beginning, a couple of things will happen. One is the IPCC, so the governments will elect a chair of the IPCC, and it's great that this time around the UK has the chair. We've got a hugely respected expert, Professor Sir Jim Ski. And then it also elects a small body of experts, a bureau of experts who from different regions around the world, who are there to help guide and advise the panel itself, to guide the country representatives, the countries. So that's the first thing that happens. And the second thing that happens is at the beginning we decide which reports we're going to prepare during that assessment cycle. So it's just started its 7th assessment cycle. We started in 2023-24. And we decided this cycle that we're going to produce its flagship 7th assessment report. The IPCC are going to produce a special report on cities and climate change, which is hugely relevant to this podcast in terms of it will talk about transport and how that fits in within cities. Yeah. And then it's going to produce a couple of other reports about to help countries report their emissions on greenhouse gas emissions. So a few different reports. Anyway, so what does a process then look like for putting these reports together? Well, the first thing is countries have to decide what will go into those reports, what the scope of those reports will be. So to do that, a number of experts are nominated and selected to put together a draft outline. So they all come together with their expertise and say, actually, if you're going to talk about this topic, you need to be thinking about this and this and this and this. And then that draft outline goes to the IPCC, goes to the panel, and for governments to agree that outline. And there's discussions, because the point is that these reports should be policy relevant. Every country will have a different view on what's considered to be policy relevant, you might imagine. And then once that outline's agreed, then the authors of that report are then selected. So countries and observers nominate experts from around the world, and then the bureau, this group of elected people, they are responsible for choosing those experts, making sure they've got the right people, the top expertise from around the world. Also, they have to ensure there's also regional balance, geographical balance among the authorship, because if you want to produce a report that's reflective of the situation, it needs to be diverse, it needs to include diverse viewpoints, you need to capture different circumstances and things, and you only get that by having a diverse author group. And it's also make sure that it's very, there's good gender balance as well, because obviously gender is a really important part of ensuring we have a complete picture of what's happening. And then those authors get on, do the work, start writing the reports. They'll produce several drafts which will go out for review. They'll go out for review by experts around the world, but they also come to the governments to review as well, and we send in our comments, and then the authors have to look at the comments that they get from governments, decide whether they've got valid points or not, and respond to those, and then update the drafts. And then final at the end of the process, which has got to, the IPCC meets for about a week, so all the panel comes together. And what we do is we have had times to review the final report, but on top of the final report is a very short summary for policymakers. And that summary for policymakers is maybe like, I don't know, 15. I mean, the intention is always to have it 10 pages long. It always ends up like 15, 20 pages long. And the panel, together with some of the lead authors from them, have to go through that summary for policymakers sentence by sentence and approve it.
That just totally blew my mind when Rich was involved in that, because it was during COVID, wasn't it? During lockdown, so everything was online, and literally, I know that he was so stressed. I'm so stressed at certain places because of kind of going through and gaveling it. Yes, we agree that, and I was like, good grief, this is an amazing experience, but quite stressful as well. You, like you said, was it 150 countries?
195 in the panel, and then you get it's
getting all of those to make a decision on that line over 15 and 20 pages. Oh my god, weren't you going or you're doing some all-nighters and stuff just by going through it? I bet you were knackered.
I mean, towards the end of the week, you realize there was always some parts of the reports that are harder to agree on, if you like, to how best to communicate the information. And there's always a bit of a rush at the end as we're trying to resolve a few issues. So for the last assessment cycle that Rich was involved in, it was a bit particular because we were doing these approval sessions online, which are really hard, really difficult, working at all hours of the day because you have to account for every time zone. There were all-nighters towards the end because that's how you have to operate, right?
Please tell me you celebrated at the end.
Oh, yeah, I think I probably slept at the end.
There's that.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
But yeah, it's intense, but hugely worth it because these some of your policymakers, they're the ones, what's in those are accepted by these 195 governments, and you can use them anywhere then, right? So if you go into the political negotiations and say, well, you've just agreed to this summary of policymakers, your government agrees with this binding, therefore, we're going to use this to inform what decisions need to be taken on climate action in this international level. So hugely important. And thinking about the reports, what impact they've had. The last cycle, it was really essential for, I don't know if you follow the international negotiations, we had Paris Agreement, huge moment in international climate action. So that was in 2015. That was informed by the IPCC reports, the setting of a temperature target. So the idea that the world should be acting to hold temperature well below 2 degrees and pursuing efforts to hold it to 1.5. Yeah. Hugely important. So that was IPCC finding. And then a couple of years later, the IPCC did a special report on 1.5 degrees to understand it better. What does it mean? What do we have to do? And from that report, that led to the idea of basically commitments around net zero emissions, including the UK's own net zero target. And all of a sudden you see countries and industry and businesses setting net zero targets because the IPCC has assessed literature and found there's this really important connection between the amount of emissions put out there, especially CO2, and temperature, and the link between temperature. So huge, and it continues on, and I can give you so many examples of how the IPCC has had huge impact on action around the world.
Do you think, this is just a little question, but probably not really, do you think that the public, the general public, say if we just talk about the UK specifically, do they understand what net zero is? Do you think they understand what net zero is?
I would say those who have a specific interest in climate and are quite passionate probably have a rough idea or reasonable idea of what net zero is. I would say the majority of the public probably wouldn't. They know this is, this would be my guess. They probably don't understand in depth what it means and what the implications are. And certainly, one of the, the last government set up renamed the department to energy security and net zero.
Yes.
Was a huge indication of it's definitely growing in awareness, and it's a real priority for them, and it's very much interlinked with this energy security part. And the current government decided to also keep that name because they know it's important. But I suspect understanding exactly what net zero is would be, my guess is that people would probably struggle to explain what it is. But you might also have thoughts on that yourself. And
yeah, I mean, I think because there's this kind of there are still people, including people I know, that, and I said this before we start recording, that still I don't think they understand, and they don't understand the impact of their own actions, and I know that obviously the IPCC report kind of is there, and the summaries there to kind of help governments decide on what their own governmental actions and the actions in the country are. I just think the phrase net zero, I understand it because of my husband, but if I wasn't married to who I'm married to, I probably wouldn't get it, because what is net zero? We know that it's about carbon and emissions and things like that, but if you go to the nitty gritty of what it actually is, and sort of, if you kind of look at, because I was going to ask you about the, kind of the carbon budget documentation, that I know it's not IPCC, but it's kind of what my thinking is. We need to do something to make this more accessible so that everybody understands it and they understand what their impact is, or should I say their lack of doing anything impact is. Because people don't. Even if we just look at transport, people are driving around in vehicles that are emitting emissions, but they don't necessarily know what that's doing. That there's two things in my mind. There's the pollution in the cities, and like you were kind of saying about kind of the flagship that you're going to be doing on with regards to cities. But I know it's different. But so you've got pollution side, and then you've got carbon, and lots of people hear lots of things, and it's just trying to get to the crux of what that is, so people just understand it, I suppose, Jolene, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I agree with that. We're talking about, before this, about ways of making climate science more accessible. And in a way, the public doesn't need to understand all the details of the science, right? They just need to understand what matters to them and what the impact is, right? And so one of the things is about putting it all in context of people's daily lives. I think particularly at the moment, we talk a lot about the cost of living crisis and how to manage this transition to net zero while ensuring that we're looking after the public. And I think there's, what we've been seeing over the past few months is, I would say a very small, but very vocal minority trying to pitch the two against each other. And that's not, and that's really unfortunate, because there are obviously benefits to net zero and that transition for the general public. Obviously there will be initial costs and things. No, absolutely. And those definitely need to be addressed, and it is really tough. But there are definitely some things that can be done at not necessarily individual level, but national or industry or business level to help those transitions. So so net zero. How do we talk about it? First of all, as I mentioned, if we want to describe it, there is a finite amount of long-lived greenhouse gases you can put, it's like CO2, put in the atmosphere, before you hit a particular temperature. So one temperature rise, global temperature rise, it relates to a certain amount of emissions. And the more you put in, the less room you've got essentially to emit before you hit your time. And if you emit too much, the temperature rise is going to be much higher. That's essentially it. The net bit implies that, you know, it's not just about what you put in, it's what you take out as well. And I guess there's a wider conversation around feasibility and how much we can do that. How much you can actually, like, for example, take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, or how much you can remove it from industrial processes, and that'd be difficult, but I won't go into too much. So how do you get people to understand that, other than, you know, every thing they do, every car they drive, you know, internal combustion engine car they drive is putting emissions into the atmosphere. Really, really tough. But I think there's a lot about helping people understand that transition to net zero brings huge benefits, in not just for the environment, but for your everyday life. You know, better planning around cities means you get a much more pleasant city to be working and living in. You know, better infrastructure, greener spaces, cleaner air, for example. There's obviously huge benefits for nature as well, and people, you know, there's a huge amount of people that are really protective of our natural environment, and the natural environment is suffering now as a result of the climate change that's already happened. It's only going to get worse. But there's definitely something about helping people understand it, make it more tangible for them, rather than talking about this abstract thing, net zero. Thinking about my little one, so we have an EV now, after many years of not having a car. And she now says, oh, when a petrol car says, oh, that petrol car is so smelly and dirty. Our car doesn't smell. But it's almost like just talking about the power of EVs from that perspective, right? That it's not just about emissions. It's just like, I don't actually want to walk down the street smelling exhaust fumes. It's terrible. You know, I don't want a car going with all this particles going into the air, with all the you know, the backfiring. So it's horrible, and they're really noisy. So yeah. Things like
Especially when you've got a 3-year-old, or, you know, when kids start going to school. And actually the episode that comes out just before yours is Rosamund Deborah, whose daughter died, and she was the first person, Ella was the first person to actually have air pollution on her death certificate. You know, and you and I both live in Reading. And we know, so we've got for you that don't know Reading at all, we've got a thing called, it's like a dual carriageway that goes round sort of Reading, called the IDR. It's the Inner Distribution Road. It's a really naff name, isn't it? But it's called the IDR, and actually it gets so chocked up. It really, really does. And my son was collecting data, like, for his A levels last year. He was doing a geography A level kind of. It was all about collecting data on different vehicles. So he was trying to identify the number of vehicles, because he was looking at kind of levels of air pollution in Reading. And I was just like, oh my God, you stood where? For how long? You know, just thinking of my son, and he's 5'10", but little people like your daughter, and the kids at you know, small kids who are breathing in all this crap, and they're at exhaust level, aren't they?
Absolutely.
You
Yeah,
know, and
it's
people need
terrible.
to think about that side of things. And yeah, I'm glad your daughter's saying this, because if little kids are actually challenging, oh, you know, that car's really smelly, then that's something, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just those things, I think, are easier for people to relate to than this more abstract thing of greenhouse gas emissions. But it's, yeah, super, super interesting. You know, for the last IPCC meeting, I was in thinking about EVs. It was in China back in February. And one of the things that really struck me when we were in Hangzhou was the number of EVs on the road, and how quiet it was. We were in like the middle of this really big city. It was just quiet and lovely. It was yeah, really, really nice. Anyway, I looked it up just before this, and apparently in China, nearly half of car sales last year were electric, and it shows.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I mean, on the other side, they've still got coal-fired power
Yeah,
stations, haven't
yeah.
they? So it's kind of yin and yang. It's like one against the other. But yeah, for on the EV side, they're pushing it massively. I just wish they'd reduce the coal-fired power
Yeah,
station side of
I think
stuff.
they've started. I need to look at what they've. I think there's some things coming out at the moment. They've started definitely investing a lot more in renewable energy, which is obviously the thing you have to do, right? If you're going to invest a lot in EVs, you have to make sure that the power supply is also decarbonised, which is a huge thing. You're right. So I think they are starting to do a lot more. But yes, hopefully
Yeah,
one day
yeah.
soon, phase out fossil fuels would be great.
I know we so need to do this. I've got to ask you, so because this is a question from Rich, and I told you I was going to ask this, and I know you mentioned it very very briefly, didn't you, about the new government kind of keeping the name of the department. What was it? How was it when you kind of moved from one government to another? Was it kind of seamless, or I know you can't kind of go into policy stuff or anything like that, but did you see a noticeable or feel a noticeable difference in kind of the the ministers in charge and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, every government will come in with their different priorities, but one thing I would say that in the UK we've been hugely lucky with, or hugely fortunate over the past, I don't know, 10, 15 years, is that accepting things we've heard in recent months, climate change has really been a cross-party issue, had cross-party support, which has been great, recognizing that it is a genuine challenge, that it's above, the divide between, the left and the right. I think when I first started, actually, we had the same Secretary of State that we have now, which is interesting. And if you know, he once that government changed, that was back in 2009. He actually went away, learned a lot about climate change, and now come back and is very passionate about it. You'll see him everywhere. The difference, I think the last government also did a lot on net zero. They put in place a lot of policies to support it. I would say every government can do more. I'm not supposed to say that, but we know what the science is saying, and we have to. So I mean, obviously it's always going to be a slightly different environment as you move from different government, but at least the general support for tackling climate change while making sure we've got a secure future with respect to energy, especially in the current geopolitical situation that the world is facing, is hugely important. So yeah, it's
Cool.
not huge changes here and there.
And I know we've not got a lot of time left, so I'm going to squeeze a few more in. I'll see how many I can squeeze in before you have to go. We talked very briefly about gender earlier. How does it, does it make it more difficult being a woman in this role that you're in? Because you aren't naturally kind of a loud, outspoken person, are you?
No, not at all.
Your singing voice is amazing, but you're very kind of, you're quite a quiet person,
Yeah,
really, aren't
yeah,
you?
absolutely. Yeah, and I know we talked about it. So this is almost a funny role for me because, as focal point, I should say I do have a team. It's not me just going on doing this by myself. So, and I manage my team and coordinate across government for positions. But, so what does it look like? I'm going into these big UN meetings, a bit like, you see in the movies, sometimes we're all sitting behind our flag, names of our countries, and I have to, put up my flag and make an intervention in front of all these countries. It seems very strange. If you had asked me this like 20 years ago, would I be doing this? Like, no, absolutely not. No, I'm just going to hide behind a book or something. So what did I learn? It's definitely getting better. So I would say I'm in the minority of, women focal points in the IPCC. I'm probably, I would also say that we're probably one of about, I don't know, 3 or 4 of the countries with more than one person in the delegation. That sometimes I go to these meetings with an all female delegation,
Okay.
which is also quite rare. So UK, I would say, is very much, leading the way in terms of ensuring gender balance within the IPCC and ensuring, different perspectives and different approaches to discussions and things. And it's really important. When I first arrived, so my not my immediate predecessor, who was only there for a year or two, but the predecessor before that, who's kind of like one of my mentors. He had been in the IPCC since it was started, hugely respected, very well known, worldwide. And that certainly when I arrived, it was like, oh, you've got big boots to fill. It's like, I know, I'm very aware of that. I'm not sure I can compete with this 6 foot tall guy who is just well respected. And there were a number of focal points that were like that, who had been in that process for a long time, all male, all very well informed and experienced opinions about the IPCC. So I have to admit, when I first started, it did take something for me to, bring myself into that environment, establish myself as a credible voice, and make my way into these little groups, of discussions. But I got it, and the IPCC, as I said, over the last few years, has placed a lot of emphasis on the role of gender in its assessments and in the way it works. Really important to have those voices. And there's a task group that looks at gender specifically within IPCC and how to make sure that women are supported in the process. We have discussions, for example, about childcare. How can we do that? And COVID was a really difficult time for all carers at the moment, but it disproportionately affected women in the process. So it's really important. When I first came back from maternity leave, I actually took my daughter to some of these meetings with me when she was very little, and I was lucky that I was able to do that, but not everyone is able to do that. So it's hugely challenging, especially with the hours and being away for a week or so at a time. It's difficult.
I can imagine. But it sounds like you've kind of settled yourself into this really well now. So I'm gonna ask. Like I say, I'm aware of the time that you need to dash in a minute. So if I can leave you with or ask you a final question, if everyone listening and watching this could do one thing to support the climate agenda, what would you ask of them?
One thing. Oh, there's quite a few. Obviously, taking all the, there are lots of individual actions we can do. Like if you've got a petrol car, get an EV, for example. But one thing I hear over and over again, especially in the current moment, is there's questions raised about how big the support is for tackling climate change. Right? And I was listening to a talk the other day. I think I don't remember who it was, but they were looking at some survey results and some studies that actually said the support for net zero, the support for tackling climate change is huge. And then you see this result around the world in every country. Right, we're talking, 70, 80% more, and then a group of people who are not quite sure, and then a very, very small minority who are really anti-climate action for their own reasons, not because it matches what evidence is saying, right? Yeah. But you wouldn't know this because there's a huge silent majority. Right. So what I think I would say, I've said this in the past, there's lots of individual actions that you can do. One of the things I would say is speak out. Lobby your local MP, make sure businesses and industries know that you want to see better from them. Make sure that, as voting public, you're getting across your view that you want that. So many people are happy to not say anything and let it go on, but then disappointed when things aren't happen. It's because if they don't know about it, they won't say anything. And I understand that, for climate change, it has to fit in with your day-to-day life as well. If you're trying to feed your kids and you have to make choices between something that's very, low carbon, environmentally friendly, etc., but there's something that's more accessible and cheaper. is a difficult challenge. So, but that responsibility shouldn't be yours. I mean, it should be, you should be offered choice that can match these things, and that's the responsibility of like industry, business, governments and things to provide that choice. But they don't know unless you're saying you support it. So speak out is what I think. Don't be the silent majority. Yeah.
I love that. That is a really, really good place to actually end. I was going to just point out to everybody, and I will try and share this in the links, and I'll share kind of anything that you want me to do in the show notes. I was going to mention about, so Ed Hawkins has got the guy who invented the climate stripes. There's a website where you can actually look at the climate stripes for each town and city, and it says exactly what that town and city is doing towards climate change, isn't it? So you can actually you can have a look at that. You can access it. Just do a climate stripes website search, or else I'll share the links. But one final question. Final. When are we going to sing again together?
Oh, Liz, we need to find a time.
I know. We do. We live in the same town, for goodness sake.
I know. We've got a great recording. I saw one of the recording studios now has a cafe in it, right? So, I mean, one around Cemetery Junction. So, yeah, let's find
We'll have to.
We'll get Rich on bass again.
We will. Absolutely. We will have this. We will follow on with another conversation on music. So on that note, I'm just going to say, Jolene, it's been absolutely amazing to catch up and talk about all the wonderful things you've been doing. I will keep following you on LinkedIn, and everybody, please follow Jolene on LinkedIn. The stuff that these guys are doing is just making a difference, a massive difference, and it takes ages to herd all these scientists together to get all this information, so they can't be doing it for nothing, so thank you Jolene. It's been wonderful. To everybody else watching and listening, you just do what I always ask you. Please like, subscribe, share, follow us on LinkedIn. We've got our own podcast page for Electric Evolution. On that note, Jolene, thank you to everybody watching and listening, and I'll see you later. Bye. Thanks for watching Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you're a charge point operator, local authority or stakeholder in EV charging, I'd love to talk to you about our Charge Point Evolution framework. It's designed to help you create a seamless EV driver journey, boost utilisation and maximise your return on investment. Alternatively, if you know someone who'd be a great podcast guest or might be interested in sponsoring an episode, you can email me on liz@fullcircleci.co.uk. Thanks again for watching.